So as Jamie said, today we'll be looking at writing task 1, which is comparing two charts. It's quite a common type. So the outline for today is interpreting a table, how to identify key information, make comparisons, and then, as Jamie said, at the end of the presentation there'll be a chance for questions. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I will try and acknowledge a few in the chat if I can. And if I don't get round to that, Jamie will look at them at the end. Okay, great, so let's get started. So the aims today. So by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to interpret a table and a bar chart, select the key features of a chart or a table, write a clear introduction, overview, and body paragraphs, and use a range of language to describe two different data sets. Okay, so now we'll look at interpreting data. So just have a quick look at the questions. I'll just read it through. So the table shows the results of a survey which sampled a cross-section of 100,000 people, asking if they travelled abroad and why they travelled for the period 1994 to 1998. So the chart shows their destinations over the same period. Okay, so we'll start off just by looking at the table. So sometimes I think when you get this kind of question, it can be a little bit overwhelming because you're faced with a lot of information. So it just really helps to look very, very carefully at what you're being asked to do and the information, the data that's given. So first of all, just looking at the table. So I just read through the question, so have a quick look again. So this is basically looking at the destinations of the period that people travelled 1994 to 1998, so people from the UK. So there's a few things you need to consider when you look at these types of questions. First of all, you need to think about the type of chart this is. So make sure that you're referring to it in the correct way. So what type of chart is this? A table? Good. Just about to ask, but everybody's answering. So it's a table. That's right. And what is being measured here? Visitors, Sky, yes. Number of visits, travels, yeah, so specifically, yes, it's the purpose of visits. Purpose of visits, yes. And yeah, the number of people traveling over a particular period. Okay, and what's the time period? Yeah, thank you, Sky. So it's 1994 to 1998. So which tenses would you use for this question? Past tense, yes, everybody's saying the past. Yeah, it sounds like an obvious question, but I read so many answers where people are mixing up the tenses. So this is one easy aspect of this question, is that you will just use the past tense because it's referring to the past. So the past simple. Okay, so now looking at this part of the question, what kind of chart is this? Sorry, it's gone back. Bar, yeah, a bar chart, that's right. Yeah, what's being measured here? Yeah, so everybody's got that, so that's great. So bar chart, so final destinations. Yes, so that's right. So it's the destinations, it's where the people have traveled to. The time period. Yeah, so again, it's the same time period. So it's 1994 to 1998. So which tense would you use for this? Past tense, yeah, past simple. Okay, so it's the same as the previous one. All right, so now we're going back to the table. So first you need to identify the key features. Okay, so if you have a quick look at the data, what does it do? What does it do? Yes. So you need to look at whether it's increasing or decreasing. In other words, does it go up or down? So it's increasing. So if you look at all the numbers, so starting from 1994 to 1998, in general, it's increasing. Yeah, it's going up. Yeah, thank you, Alice and Rana. So everybody's getting that. What are the highest and the lowest points? So the highest points. Yes, so it's 1998. So it's basically for each section, it goes up, right? If you compare 1994 with 1998, it's gone up in each section. So the highest is 1998. And the lowest? Yeah, Sky, yeah, 1995. So I think for each section it's 1995, that's right. So there's a slight dip in 1995 and then it increases after that. Any similarities at all? Can you see any similarities between any of the data? So business in 94, 95 is similar. Yes. 97, 98, not so significant. Yeah, I mean, in some cases it doesn't increase a lot. So in the case of business, there's not much of an increase. So there's a lot of similarities between each year there. Business and visits to friends and relatives are fairly similar. There's not too much of a difference. Okay, any notable exceptions? So is there anything that particularly stands out there that's different? Other reasons? Yes, other reasons. How is it a notable exception? So how is other reasons different? Other reasons decreases. It's kind of, I mean, it decreases in 1995 and then it goes up and it continues to go up, but there's a big difference. There's a big difference between the number of people, okay? So if you compare that with, for example, holiday, there's a huge difference. So it's just more the number of people there. Okay, so now looking at key features. So most people traveled for holidays. Okay, so that's quite clear. There's a huge difference between holiday and the other sections there. The number of visits abroad increased over the period. Okay, so that is for each section, it's the same. Okay, it does dip slightly in 1995, but the rest of the time it's increasing. And then with the table, the most popular destination by far was Western Europe. Okay, what does by far mean? Yes, a huge difference. Yes, I guess. Yeah, so it just means there's a huge difference between the number that went to Western Europe and the others. Okay, as you can see, there's a huge difference. So that expression by far is a useful one to use there. Okay, another feature. So visits to Western Europe increased. So as you can see, from 1994 to 1998, each year, well, apart from 1995, there's a slight decrease, but other than that, the numbers increased. And visits to North America and other areas were low and stayed fairly low. So they didn't really, I mean, they increased slightly, but they didn't really increase much there. Okay, so we'll just have a look at an example structure now. So first of all, actually, I'm just going to ask you, how many paragraphs do you think you need for this type of task? 4. Some are saying 3, some are saying 4. Okay, 4 is correct. That's right. So what would the first paragraph be? The introduction, yeah, Alexis, Rana, yes, everybody knows that. Okay, so we have the introduction and the next part. Yeah, some of you are guessing this. So the overview, that's right. So this is very, very important for this type of question. And the third paragraph? Body, yeah, body paragraph 1, so, or body A. And the fourth paragraph? Body B. Okay, some of you are saying conclusion, right? For this type of essay, you don't, for task 1, you don't need a conclusion. So this is the typical structure for this. So introduction, overview, and then body A, body B. So going back to the introduction, so I was going to ask you this, sorry. What do you do in the introduction? Paraphrase the question, Mohammed, that's right. Yes, good. So this is obviously the normal thing you do for these types of essays. So state what the charts show by paraphrasing the title. Okay, well, I'm also going to give you how much you should be writing for each section. So this should be 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, how about the overview? So yeah, Mohammed's saying key features, 2 sentences. Key features, that's right, the general idea. Yeah, how many sentences do you think? 3, some are saying 2, some 3, 4, okay. So it's, yeah, you're all right really. So it's 2 to 4 sentences. And in the overview, you should outline 3 to 4 main points, trends and events. So you're looking for general things, okay, about the 2 charts. It's very, very important, the overview, if you want to score, if you want to get a good band score. And then body A, what would you talk about there? Specific features, major details. Okay, yeah, night, that's right. So the first chart, okay. I mean, there are different ways that you can answer this question, but I think the most logical and the easiest way is just to have one paragraph per chart. So it just makes it easier to organize your ideas. So in body A, you would describe chart 1, giving specific data and examples. And this would be 3 to 5 sentences. Okay, so one of the keywords actually in this, for this paragraph is describe. So you don't have to interpret the information, you're just really describing what's there. Okay, and then body B. Same as A, that's right. So describe chart 2, giving specific data and examples, and the same sort of length. Okay, somebody was asking about the overview, about the position of it within the answer. So you can actually put it after the 2 bodies, okay, as long as you include it, that would be fine. All right, so that's the example structure there. Right, so now moving on to the introduction. So as you can see, we've got the title again, the question. So I'll just read it once more. So the table shows the results of a survey which sampled a cross-section of 100,000 people, asking if they travelled abroad and why they travelled for the period 1994 to 1998. The chart shows their destinations over the same period. Right, so as we said before, you need to paraphrase the question. What can you do to paraphrase? What are the different ways you can paraphrase? Synonyms, Mohammed, that's right, Francis, yeah. Yeah, so that's probably the most common way, is to use synonyms. And voice, yes, if it's in the passive, you can use the active. Anything else? Yeah, you wouldn't really change the tense, Neo, But word order you can change. You could change the order of information as well, which is what we're going to do here. So there are different things you can do. You can also use different word forms as well. Okay, so let's look at this now. Right, so just got on the left things that you can do. So use synonyms and grammar transformation. Okay, you need to be accurate and precise. And don't write too much. Don't write a list of more than 5 items. Okay, so now looking at how to paraphrase it. So we need here a word for shows. Yeah, some of you got it straight away. Alyssa, yes, illustrates is probably the best synonym there. So the table illustrates. Okay, and then a synonym for why, or another way of saying that, the reasons, that's right. The reasons why. Okay, so this is one important thing to notice, that it's just referring to people that live in the UK, so UK residents. So you need to make that clear. So people reside, it could be residing, also living. Okay, living in the UK. So why people living in the UK, traveled, another word for, yeah, that's right. Another word for abroad is overseas. Okay, and then a word which makes sense here for the period 1994 to 1998. Between, yeah, that's right. Between 1994 and 1998. Okay, so that refers to the table, and now we've got the bar chart, so you just need to somehow connect them. So which word would make sense? While, yes. Any others you could use? Whereas, yeah. So we've used while here. So while the bar chart shows. Okay, so then you need to find a synonym for this. The places or countries. Okay, different words, destination or regions we've chosen. Okay, but the ones you mentioned would make sense as well. So it shows the regions they chose to visit over the same period. So another word, during this period. Thank you, Sky. Good. Okay, and then as you can see, we've changed the information, which you can also do. So we've moved some of the information to the end of the paraphrase. So both the table and the chart are, yes, Alyssa, good. So a verb here, based on a survey of, yeah, so you just put in the number. So of 100,000 people, okay. As you can see, that's much more concise than the actual question. So that would work quite well. All right, so now looking at the next part, which is the overview. Okay, so we have here 3 bands. So most of you will be, I would imagine, aiming for probably 6 or 7. Some of you I noticed slightly more. This is what you need to remember in order to achieve one of these bands. With the overview, it's necessary, you absolutely have to have an overview in order to get a band higher than 5. So if you look at these, you can see the difference. Band 5 recounts detail mechanically with no clear overview. There may be no data to support the description. Okay, so it's the bare details really with band 5. What does the word mechanically mean? Okay, some of you, Grace and Saf, are looking for 7, good. Redundant. By heart, yeah, it's not, it's just the basic facts. There's not really much information there. Band 6 is slightly better, so it's an overview with information appropriately selected. So they've got the right information. Maybe it's not as clear as it could be. Whereas Band 7, it's very clear overview of main trends, differences, or stages. So as you can see, there's just a slight difference between each band, but the clearer you make your overview, the better, obviously, the better band you're going to get. All right, so now looking at the overview. Right, so we're going to look at 5 key features that you can focus on for this particular task. Firstly, looking at the table. So one feature is that most people traveled for holiday. Anything else? Any other features that you notice in this table? In general, the number has increased. Yes, good. So that's another key feature. So the total number of visits increased, that's right. Okay, so we've just got 2 key features for the table, and now moving on to the bar chart. So I want to try and find 3 key features here. So what do you notice about the bar chart? There's a big gap. Yeah, Western Europe is the most visited. I think that's probably the main thing. Yeah. So most popular destination is Western Europe. Okay, anything else? Fluctuations. Yeah, anything else you can see there? Yes, yeah, that's right. So the visits to Western Europe increased. Okay, so that's another thing. And then the last thing, which some of you have pointed out, so the visits to North America and other areas were low and stayed low. Okay, so they're the 5 key features that we can see from looking at these 2 different charts. So as I said, there are 2 for the first one and 3 for the second, and now you just need to combine them. So to introduce the overall, the overview, you start with a word like overall. Okay, so something travel was by far the most popular reason for going abroad each year. So this is looking at the first feature, holiday, that's right. And because we're talking about, we're giving 2 key features of the first chart, you would include the second feature in that sentence as well. So try to keep them in the same sentence. So while the total number of overseas trips, something over the period, increase, that's right. Okay, so that's the first 2 features there. And then for the second chart. So we have a really lovely phrase here, by a large margin. What does that mean? By a large margin. Yeah, big gap, by far. Yes, that's right. So it means the same as that. It's just another expression. By a large margin, the preferred travel destination was Western Europe. That's right. Which, something in popularity. Okay, this is the 4th feature. Grew, it could be. Yeah, we've used increased again, but you could use, I'd probably use a different word, maybe grew or rose in popularity or something like that. So try to find a synonym. As travel to North America and other regions remained, that's right, good, remained relatively low. So as you can see there, you've got 2 sentences. First one covers 2 features of the first chart, and then the second one covers the 3 features of the second chart. So it just makes it really, really clear. Okay, and then looking at the verbs. So it's past simple all the way through. It's really easy. Was increased, remained. And what about linking expressions? Which linking expressions can you see? While, which, overall, that's right. Okay, overall, while, which, and as, yeah. And then paraphrasing. Okay, so we've got the most popular reason. And then we've got popularity, so using a different word form, and preferred travel destination, so it's another way of saying that. So it just varies your vocabulary. And then also, as I mentioned, emphasizing expressions. So we've got by far, and instead of repeating that, you can say by a large margin. Okay. So yeah, as I said before, there are different approaches to organizing body paragraphs. And the one we're looking at is probably the most logical. It's just the easiest to do. So you've got body A is chart 1, and then body B is devoted to chart 2. So you're not likely to get confused if you follow this method. And then within your paragraphs, you need to organize your details logically. So it makes sense to look at highest to lowest, the biggest to the smallest change, and look at similar categories as well. And obviously you need to support your examples with specific data, so try to use the figures there to support what you're saying. Okay, so in 1994, so something people surveyed traveled abroad on holiday, so you need a number. Sorry, I'm giving it to you. Yeah, 15,246 people surveyed traveled abroad on holiday. So this is what we mean by specific data, so put the actual number in. And what would make sense here? Something to 20,700 in 1998. Yeah, you've got the right verbs there. So it's really increase or rise. But in this case, you wouldn't use the past simple. So this is just a way of kind of linking the ideas. So creating cohesion within the sentence. So rising to. I mean, you could say which rose. You could say which rose, but rising is a kind of nicer way to say it. And then you need to include a linking phrase such as in contrast. So you're giving kind of conflicting information. So in contrast, only 3,957 people traveled for what? Business, that's right, yeah. So for business in the same year. Followed by something who visited family and friends. That's right, yeah. So as you can see, we're just kind of going through the table, so going down the rows. And I guess it helps that the numbers are going down, so it makes it it's quite an easy table to discuss, really, because the information is fairly logical. Okay, and then we sort of jump a row and go to the end looking at the total. So the total number of visits increased from 22,072 in 1994 to what? Yes, Maria, good. Most of you've got that. So 28,828 in 1998, that's right. Okay, and then the one piece of information that's missed out, can put in here. So because it's conflicting, it's something that's slightly different, you can use the word however. So however, the number traveling for other reasons stayed fairly low. Yes, yeah, it is low. I mean, you could say that, or constant. Steady makes sense. Steady is the same as constant, so it didn't really change, in other words. Good. So looking at the verb forms, as you can see, past simple, traveled, followed, visited increased and stayed. We've got verb plus ing for extra information, as I pointed out, the word rising. Language for describing changes as well. So rising to, increased from and to, and stayed fairly constant at. So for these kinds of expressions, make sure, these kind of verbs, make sure that you know the correct prepositions, right? So it's quite easy to make mistakes with those. Okay, and then linking expressions. So in contrast, followed by who and however. Okay, and then adverbs. So only, fairly, and around. Okay, so I'm just moving on fairly quickly because we haven't got that much time. But body B, we look at chart 2, as I said. Again, make sure you organize your details logically in the same way. So highest to lowest, biggest to smallest, and looking at similar categories together. And of course, make sure you use specific data to support your examples. Okay, so visits to the most popular destination, Western Europe. Okay, so which word makes sense? Rose? Yep, rose would make sense, or we've used increased again, so increased significantly. So increased a lot. From just, okay, if you look at 1994, so just what, 20,000? Just under, yep, under is okay, or you could say below as well. Just under 20,000 in 1994, to slightly below, yeah. So if you use below first, you would use under there. Okay, so just make sure you vary the words. Okay, and then far fewer people travel to other areas and North America. Yes, so in contrast would make sense, or by contrast, or conversely. On the other hand, Atta, you could say that as well, Alexis, yeah, that's right. In 1998, the figures were something 2,400 and 2,300. Approximately, or around as well. Yeah, approximately is probably slightly more academic. And a word that finishes this off. Respectively, that's a really nice way to finish that part. With visits to these regions, having experienced something little growth, relatively little growth. Okay, so as you can see, we've got quite a few adverbs in here. So notice the verb form. So past simple again, increased, travelled, and were. The perfect participle, can anyone spot that? Perfect participle, this is a nice new bit of grammar, probably for some of you. That's right, Alexis, good, having experienced. And then linking expressions. Okay, I was just going to say, actually, if you use having experienced, if you use that kind of structure, that will really help with your grammatical range, and you should score, get a good band score, or should help you to get a better band score. Linking expressions, so we've got conversely, that's right, with. And then, as I said, quite a few adverbs. Which adverbs do we have there? Slightly, yeah. So significantly, just, slightly, approximately, respectively, relatively. Okay, so we're just about finished. So we've got the introduction, the overview, chart 1 and chart 2. Altogether, that's 219 words, and it would be a band 9 if you managed to write like that. So 219 words is actually, it's a little bit more than you need to, but it's a perfect answer. So just to reiterate, don't start writing straight away, make a plan. Don't spend, or try not to spend, more than 20 minutes on task 1 if you can. Please don't count your words because that takes too much time. If you practice writing a lot, you should know roughly how many words you write per line. And if you use the IELTS answer sheet, you're going to know how many words you're writing, so that would really help. And make sure you practice a range of chart types. You don't need a conclusion, Pardeep. No, only for task 2. Thank you. So sorry I had to rush through a little bit at the end, but we've got some time now to answer your questions if there are any. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mary. That's a great presentation. Thank you. And yeah, thank you guys for taking part and giving us some really good answers there. That's been great. So while Mary's been presenting today, I have been helping to answer some of your questions that you've been putting in the Q&A. We now have some more time to discuss any other questions you have, whether that's about the academic writing, comparing 2 charts, or any general aspect of the IELTS test. So if you'd like to add any questions you have to the Q&A, we'll discuss them in a moment. And thank you guys. It's really nice to see your feedback there. I'm glad you found that helpful. So excellent. Before we look at your questions, I would just like to do a little bit of promotion for the premium services which we have available on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. For writing, we offer a writing evaluation service where you can send in examples of your writing to the website. One of our team of qualified IELTS examiners can go through your writing. They can give you an estimated band score for each of the different criteria. We can tell you your strengths, your weaknesses, any common errors that you make, and that kind of feedback can really help you to improve your writing and hopefully achieve a better band score. So if you're interested in that, I've put the link in the chat. It's our writing evaluation service. We offer a similar service for speaking evaluation as well, where you can book a mock test with a speaking examiner. We'll go through the full test with you under test conditions and give you feedback on your speaking too. So that is available via our website. I've put the link to our YouTube channel and also our Facebook group. So you'll be able to watch the recording for this webinar on our YouTube channel tomorrow. And yeah, that's great. Thank you guys for the feedback. I'm seeing some very, very sweet feedback here, Mary. You're perfect. Yes, with a flower as well. Thank you guys. So yeah, fantastic. So I think we can take a look now at some of your questions. So let's have a wee look, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can before the hour is up. Okay, so guys, let's see. First question here is from Mohammed. Mohammed Ibeda, who's asking, should we paraphrase in the overview and the detailed paragraphs and cite exact words for their specific data? Oh, this is a good question. So I think the question here might be like, is it okay to use expressions like almost 10,000 or, you know, nearly a third, or do we have to give the exact figure when describing the details?
In the overview?
I think Mohammed's asked both for the overview and in the detail paragraphs.
Well, in the overview, you're looking at more trends, really. So in that case, you would probably use more adverbs. Whereas you need more specific details in the body paragraphs. So you need actual data there.
Yeah,
I think if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's the question. If we're not answering the question, Mohammed, let us know. But I think, as I understand it, yeah, I would say, do you need to use the exact words for specific data? For that, Mohammed, I would say you you should try to paraphrase, because this shows off your range of language and your flexibility. So especially in the detailed paragraph, as Mary said, you need to include specific data, but you don't need to use the exact number. So if you say almost a third, or just under 10%, then that's specific enough to give the examiner an idea of the data. So, and it lets you show off that range of language. So I think it's a good idea to do both, to use specific figures and also to paraphrase as well. Sorry, I'll try and make the questions as clear as I can for you. Let's see, a question here from Ahmed about the minimum number of words. Is there a minimum word count for task 1?
Well, it should be 150 words. I think it's 150. But if you go over, there's no maximum. So yeah, at least 150.
Yeah, exactly. What I've tend to found is with certain question types, like comparing two charts, that just because there is quite a lot of data, you might need to write slightly more. So for this task, it was about 220 words. You don't need to write that, but it's quite difficult to summarize the data and give details just in 150 words when there's two figures. So you might want to go slightly over that for comparing two chart questions. But that's not a rule. You won't be penalized unless you go under 150. Okay, let's see. A question here from Lubomir. Lubomir is asking, should we use the same paragraphs for the second task, for writing part 2?
The same? Do you mean the same number, or the same?
I think maybe the same paragraph structure. So introduction, body 1, overview.
I mean, it depends. I think with task 2, there are so many different types of question types for task 2. So I mean, you need a conclusion anyway, so that's one difference. The introduction, you would have that would be the same or similar, and then body paragraphs. But I think it really depends on the type of question. I mean, generally, I would say it's probably like four or five paragraphs overall in general. But
yeah. I'd agree with that. And I think that links to another question that I just saw in the chat of, do we need a conclusion for task 1?
No.
Yeah.
You don't need a conclusion.
Yeah. I think that's perhaps like part of the difference between task 1 and task 2 structure, is that in the task 1, you can write an overview, which is the summary of the main features and ideas. And that can either go as a second paragraph, or you can put it at the end of your essay where a conclusion would be. But it's an overview rather than a conclusion, because it doesn't need to go at the end of the essay. Whereas in task 2, you're always going to have a conclusion at the end of your essay. Okay, let's see. So other questions we have here, guys, we'll take a look. Here's a good question from Aluwatoin. Aluwatoin's asking, can you tell me how to arrange the key features using those points illustrated in the class? For example, highest to lowest, biggest to smallest. What are some logical ways of arranging key features in a chart? I guess this is talking about details.
Yeah. I mean, maybe as I did. I started with the biggest number, in terms of the people going on holiday. I mean, luckily it was a fairly easy, as I said before, fairly easy chart to look at, or table, because it went down, the rows kind of went down in terms of numbers. So it was, logically, it was easy. I think it was, if it was mixed up, it would have been a little bit more difficult, but maybe looking for the biggest number first and then going that way, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. I think, starting, I think there are a few kind of logical ways that things tend to be organized. It's like from biggest to smallest, from most general. Could group all the ones that are the same, and then any that are different as well. So there are a few approaches, and I think it doesn't necessarily matter so much as long as it's fairly logical, as long as one of those kind of structures you've chosen. So yeah, excellent. So oh no, Win, you missed the webinar. What a shame. Sorry. But don't worry, it will be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So you'll be able to watch that again. And Alice, I hope that answers your question as well. The recording for the webinar will be up on the YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that in the chat just now. So you'll be able to watch it there. Let's see, Sakiru, you're asking, when is task 2 writing coming up again? Good question. If you check out our website, ieltsonlinetest.com, I'll put a link to the upcoming lessons in the chat, and you'll be able to check on the website there. Okay, I think my screen's freezing a little bit, so
yeah, it just froze before, I think, Jamie. But
yeah, sorry, yeah. So hopefully,
it's not me this time somehow.
No, I was just gonna say we didn't have any technical problems there for the whole webinar. So
I can't believe it.
Yeah, great. So yeah, that should be coming in the chat in a moment. Right. Yep. I've put some links in there. Hopefully you can see. Let's see. Good question from Dan here in the chat. Can I use poetic figures and poetry quotes in my text, in my writing?
I'm not sure you could do that in task 1. But I don't know. I mean, I would recommend keeping it simple. I mean, you need to show a wide range of vocabulary, but unless it's sort of discussing poetry or something along those lines, I would probably avoid that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree as well, Mary. And if I could just recommend, we covered this topic in last week's webinar on advanced vocabulary for IELTS, where we looked at the use of idiomatic language, particularly in writing task 2, but also in speaking as well, and how for speaking you can be a bit more, there's a lot more idiomatic language you can use, but for writing you want to avoid most types of idiomatic language. So it's quite a tricky area. But if you want to look at it in more detail, you can check out the recording of that webinar, because we discussed it in quite a lot of detail there. So that'd be my suggestion rather than going back over everything today. Very cool. Let's see. Quick question from Tracy here about the reading and listening section. Is it okay to write your answers using uppercase writing in the reading and listening section?
You probably know more than me, actually, Jamie, but I would say as long as it's clear. Yeah, as long as the examiner can read it, that's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I believe the rule there is that you can write in block capitals is fine, and if you can write quickly in block capitals, then that might actually be better for you, because you won't lose marks if you don't capitalize some answers. So if you write in lowercase answers, some of the answers require you to capitalize the first letter, like if it's the name of a person or a place or a company. But if you write everything in block capitals, then that's fine. You won't lose any marks for the block capitals. So it's fine basically to write in block capitals if you find that easier.
It might take, I'd imagine it might take a little bit longer. That's the only thing. So
Yeah.
if you push for time, it might be a bit time consuming.
Yeah, and probably to avoid that in the writing test, that's just for listening and reading, because in writing you need to show that you can use punctuation correctly. So you need to show that you can capitalize appropriately there. Okay, let's see. There was a good question here from Francis. Francis says, "Thanks, Mary. I wish I could do it this well in my exam." Yep. I experience running out of vocabulary. Some people suggest that we need to avoid repeating some words like increase or decrease. What can you say about this?
Well, obviously you need to show ideally a wide range of vocabulary, Francis. So in that section, in the lexical like resource section, band, you might not get a very high band score if you're repeating words a lot. So it's not showing that you've got flexibility with the language. But at the same time, and if you probably start panicking a little bit when you're under exam conditions, and you might find that you're forgetting words. So try not to worry too much about that, and just do the best you can. If you do have to repeat words, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. In our webinar on dynamic charts, the academic task 1 describing dynamic chart, we have a section where we look at different ways of paraphrasing common words for describing graphs, like increase or decrease, a rise, a fall, this kind of language. So you might like to check out that webinar on our YouTube channel, and again, we go into that in a bit more detail there. But I definitely agree with what Mary said there about it's okay to repeat some words. And in fact, it's better to repeat the same word and for your writing to be clear and easy to read, rather than trying to use unusual different words every time, because then it's likely that you'll make mistakes and your writing will be less easy to read. So some repetition is okay. All right. Let's see. Pachu, I'm looking for your question, but I can't see it. So if you can pop it in the chat or in the Q&A, we'll try and tackle it. Okay. I'm just aware that we have a few minutes left to go, so we might not have time to answer all of your questions. But if you do have specific questions you'd like us to discuss, you can add them to our YouTube channel as comments and we'll answer them on there. Okay. So let's see. I think we've got time for a couple more questions, if that's all right with you, Mary.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. Pachu is asking one class for describing numbers, percentage, and fractions. Pachu, if you check out our static chart webinar, we do cover the language for numbers, percentages, fractions, and so on in that webinar. So you'll find more information there. Let's see. We've got a few more questions here. So yeah, I think final question for today. This is from Sever, who's asking, a lot of IELTS teachers say that the overview part should be the last part. Which one is correct? Should it be the second paragraph or the last paragraph?
Either is fine. So you can either put it in second or you can put it at the end, as long as you include it. That's the main thing to remember.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, yeah, I'd agree with that, Sever. It's, both are fine as long as it's clear, especially if you signal that with the word overall as well. That will help make it very clear to the examiner. Okay, guys, I'm afraid that is all we've got time for today's session. So I would just like to say a very big thank you to Mary for presenting today.
Well,
So
thank you,
thank you,
Jamie.
Mary.
Thank you for all the lovely questions and comments and flowers.
Yep.
Appreciate them.
Yep, yep. Thanks for that, guys. It's been really really good to be hosting with you today. So, as I said, if you do have any extra questions, you can add them to our YouTube channel. We'll discuss them on there, and we have a number of different webinars coming up. So Safwan and for Suji. You can check out on our website for upcoming sessions, and hopefully we'll have a session that's useful for you. All right. So yeah, just like to say a very big thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. Good luck with your exams if they're coming up soon.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again in another webinar soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Mary. Bye now.
Bye.